The public hearing, the Board of Education special meeting, public hearing, Thursday, February 7th, 2019. We're calling the meeting to order at 7:15 p.m. We're going to start first with a salute to the flag. So if everyone will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. First, just a couple quick housekeeping items. There are two sign-up books outside. One was just to sign up that you were here. It's a record of how many people came. But there was a second book for those people who want to speak, who want to make public comment, which is really what this is about. If you haven't signed that book, it would be great if you could go out and put your name on it, because it's going to eventually make its way down here. And that's where we will record who is actually speaking. So again, you do that. Secondly, as frustrating as it might be for people who are making public comment, we, the Board of Education members, do not respond to the public comment. We will take your comments, but we will not, it is not a debate forum. We will not comment back on your comments to us. And lastly, I want to thank Ms. Cummings and the staff here at Rogers for hosting us.
Thank you.
We much appreciated that. So with that, the first item will be the superintendent will give a presentation on the budget as it has been presented to the board.
Thank you, Mr. George. All of you should have a PowerPoint in your hand. In addition to the slides that are in the PowerPoint, and I won't be walking through all of them, I promise you, there are about 50 or 60 more slides with additional data on our website, and the URL is on slide 10 of this presentation. So I encourage you, if you want more information, more detailed information about our budget, what's in each line, you can go to the website and it's all available to you. So, what do we hope to achieve tonight? Don't worry about it. So we plan to give you an overview of the budget, talk about some of the assumptions. These are critical assumptions that go into our budget build. Some of them will be answered in the coming weeks as we get more information from the state or insurers, vendors, and the like. But those assumptions are at the foundation or at the root of our budget. We'll talk about some of the highlights in our budget and works in progress. We then will open the floor first to answer clarifying questions on things that we presented, data we presented, what does it mean? And then we'll solicit more general public comment, those probing questions that you all have that would probably take a half hour to answer each. We'll take those questions and we'll formulate responses to them, and we'll share them back at the board meeting on Tuesday. So to recap what we talked about in our previous budget meetings, in Appendix 1 you'll see how our past budget supported our school success. And Appendix 1 is a series of slides that talks about student achievement. And as you can see in those slides, and those are state data compared to our district data, the Stamford Public Schools, notwithstanding the challenges that many of our students face, generally outperform the rest of the state. The most telling of those statistics are toward the end when we talk about graduation rate, which is an important statistic not only for our district, but for students individually. Because among the data that the state collects, none can predict success in life as measured by earnings or civic participation or any number of other outcomes than high school graduation. Another statistic of importance is college matriculation, and more importantly, college persistence. Continuing on in college from your first to your second year, and from that point forward, the high school experience doesn't have as great an impact. But that college persistence rate far outstrips the rest of the state, far outstrips the rest of the nation at 90% continuing on to their second year of college. So it's a really remarkable statistic that inures to our students' success. So our budget in the past has supported those successes. The current budget is designed to support our strategic goals that are located in Appendix 2. And although there are a lot of words on that slide, let me just summarize the 4 goals of our district. And they're around being a learning organization, or becoming a learning organization, around cultivating those habits of mind, critical thinking, creative thinking, self-regulatory thinking, habits of body, and here we're not talking about just fitness, we're talking about wellness, we're talking about basic nutrition, and habits of heart. And while heart includes all those wonderful values that our community has and demonstrates every day, kindness, the gratitude, the generosity, when it comes to habits of heart, we focus on 5 things, things that we know benefit our students in the long run, both in college and in career, in family life. And those include things like dependability, motivation, perseverance in life. So our current budget supports those goals. However, the current context that we're in warrants prudence. We have a number of slides in the other presentations about economic conditions. But the one that we want to point out here is that the trend in city revenues is a growth rate of about 3.25%. So with that kind of trend in revenue growth for the city, any budget that comes in over that 3.25% on a sustained basis is, quote, unsustainable. We would bankrupt the city if we continue to outstrip the city's revenue growth. So the budget context warrants prudence. The current budget drivers, actually the number is closer to 4.0, just to maintain the programs that we have and we value. We'll see a slide later on how it breaks down, but the increase is going to be 4%, just to keep what we have. Remember that the sustainable rate of growth is about 3.25%, and our base budget outstrips that right off the bat. We talked about the critical assumptions, and we'll be talking about those more later that go into our budget build. We had a Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. We had less involvement than we had in past years, but the input was nonetheless extremely valuable, so we include a slide in Appendix 6. It includes their key recommendations. All this amounted to a strategy as we went into our budget build of creating efficiencies, so the same dollars in, getting more output, reallocations within our budget. So as our priorities shifted or our initiatives shifted for the year, rather than just add on to the budget, we sought to reallocate funds from other things that we were doing. And finally, invariably, unfortunately, of the many great initiatives that would advance our goals and advance our mission, we did have to scale back the initiatives for the coming year. So what are the assumptions that we had? You can see them right here. We've talked about them before. That state aid would be flat. We didn't put in a specific number about unsettled contracts, but they are out there. We did have a health insurance increase, and this is a really important number to focus on. We did experience a health insurance increase of $2.5 million. And in and of itself, if we were just to take that, that's about an 8 to 9% increase in our health insurance costs. Clearly not something that's sustainable. It squeezes out other spending in our budget. But we asked that everybody consider this in light of what we did last year, which was we shifted out of a self-insured plan into the state health benefits plan and reaped a huge benefit, huge savings to the district. Our current spending, or our proposed spending, even with this $2.5 million increase in this budget, although it produces a large percent increase to the budget, actually is below the 2017-2018 health insurance spend. So while we reaped the benefit last year, and that helped us to get to a 1.1% increase in last year's budget, this year we had an 8 to 9% jump, which led to largely to that 4% increase that I talked about earlier. But if you would consider that over the 2 years, because it is a multi-year process, really it evens out. It is a sustainable rate of growth for health insurance. There's this thing called vacancy savings. We budget for positions, we don't immediately fill them, or the people who fill them come in at a lower rate of pay than the people who leave. We assumed that we would generate about $2.5 million worth of savings there. We plan to take from our insurance reserve when we were self-insured school district. We built up a reserve just in case. We've appropriated half of that reserve into this coming year's budget. We plan on getting we predict that we're going to get about $1.3 million in Medicaid reimbursement revenue. That's an estimate. We believe we're going to get something called excess costs for special education students that cost us over a certain dollar figure. Largely, their students who go out of district, and we pay large tuitions for those private school placements. We do get reimbursement for that excess cost above that threshold, and we think we're going to get $4.2 million between that and some grants. And finally, we expect we rent out our buildings, or we get fees for building use, and we expect to appropriate $300,000 from that account. So those assumptions are built into this year's budget. As I mentioned, the status quo is going to drive up our budget by 4% going into next year. And basically, salaries are going to drive about 1.7% of that increase. Benefits are going to account for another 1.4%. But again, if you think of it across 2 years, we would have seen a 0% increase over the past 2 years. Transportation and out-of-district placements, it's about $1.9 million more than the current year's budget. But because it's such a large number, it does contribute to the overall increase. So everything else in our base budget only results in a 0.2% increase. It's really driven by those first 2.5 drivers. That's what makes our budget what it is. So starting with what we have, there's a 4% increase. What are the adjustments to the budget going into next year? Students with the greatest need, and our students were debating about that earlier. We take the position that students with the greatest need deserve the opportunity to access education. And so we build in supports for those students. It does cost more money, but we think that that's the right thing to do. In addition, we're bound to do it by law. So that's a $2.5 million increase. We are seeing that while our overall student population is growing by about 1.4%, our special needs population is growing by about 5.5%. So it's growing faster than our general enrollment. The more expensive students, the ones who need greater support, are increasing at a faster rate than the general enrollment. So it's $2.5 million to support those students. Our curriculum and instruction initiatives, this is where the core of our strategic plan is. We had a couple of $1 million in initiatives that were in our plan for next year. Unfortunately, because of the context that we're in, we didn't feel that we could support them all going into next year. So we've scaled them back considerably, and we'll talk about that a little later. SRBI, that's too narrow a term. It's really tiered intervention, tiered support for students, and going back to the debate, students who are struggling, but tiered support also means support for students who are accelerated. So all of that is in the tiered support line, and we're putting money into that for next year. Everything else we're actually decreasing. So the net budget, the total increase in our budget, operating budget, is 5% for next year. I'm using Tuesday night. Our board, recognizing the situation we're in with our facilities, felt that we should add some money to our maintenance line. We had added 3.25% to our maintenance line for maintenance and repair. This is separate and above the capital spending we're going to do on our facilities. But in our operating budget, our board judiciously added $200,000 to that line. And currently we're working with the rest of our budget to try to see what we can manage so that that 5% doesn't go up. So we're looking for reallocation spaces. But we'll be presenting that on Tuesday for formal budget adoption. We implemented a number of strategies to manage our growth. I won't bore you with that, but the second bullet there deserves some attention. I'm sorry, in the first bullet, the third in-depth creating in-district special ed programs, we direct you to appendices 9 through 11. I'd encourage you to look at that because although special ed is driving a significant part of the increase for next year, if you look at how special education has been spending its money, we've actually seen a bending of the cost curve for special education cost per pupil. And you'll see some of the strategies in that last slide in particular. One of the major strategies the special education department has done is bringing more programs in district. So students who would normally be placed out of district now have in-district opportunities thanks to our special ed department. It hasn't been easy to create those programs. It's been a real challenge. But that last slide shows not only the declining percentage of students, special ed students who are going out of district, and the cost in each year. In the green bar, you'll see the cost for out-of-district placements. But that gray bar shows you the cost that would have occurred if those students had been sent out of district, if we hadn't created programs in district. The delta, the difference between the top of the gray bar and the top of the green bar is what we call cost avoidance, and that's about $2 million a year to the district. So we appreciate the hard work of our special ed department in managing the costs despite the increasing enrollment. And that second bullet, major bullet, partnering with community-based organizations. Our strategic plan this year calls for really engaging our community-based organizations in collective effort. We've been part of the Cradle to Career initiative in Stanford for a number of years, and we haven't yet seen the efficiencies generated from collective impact. This year, we are intentionally inviting them to participate in building version 2 of our strategic plan so that we can benefit from the work that they already do and not duplicate it or do it less well or efficiently in district. So those are some of the strategies that we use to manage growth. As I mentioned, we have a number of unfunded priorities, so we've slowed the rolling out of our next generation science standards curriculum, and we've slowed the design and implementation of new curricula generally. We've also scaled back a number of staffing requests for initiatives that our principals had in mind. But that leaves a number of works in progress. All of you are familiar with the mold that we've had in district. You know that the city, the mold task force went to the Board of Finance to get a supplemental appropriation to address the mold needs. But that only covered us from October 29th forward. Everything from July 1 to October 29th was done in district and out of our maintenance budget. The cost of that was about $702,000, and we didn't anticipate that, so that's an unforeseen expense. We could stop spending today to ensure that we have that money at the end of the year, but we think it's proper in this case to approach the city for a supplemental appropriation for the current year. What will that do? If the current year's budget, adjusted budget, increases by $700,000, that actually causes a decrease in the increase, the 5% increase in our budget. It drops because of that to 4.5% or thereabouts. Is there any decrease in actual spending? No, it's just an optical thing because the adjusted budget for the current year is higher. Second thing that our board has considered or is considering is I told you that earlier that we had appropriated $950,000 from our insurance reserve. There's about $950,000 remaining in there. There's good reason to keep some of that in there because all we have at present is an 8 to 9% increase estimate for insurance, health insurance this year. We've only budgeted for the 8%. There's good reason to keep some of that in reserve. In addition, we fully expect, no, I shouldn't say that. There's probably an 80% chance that we will go back into a self-insured pool down the road once we reap the benefit of being in the state health benefits plan, lower premium costs. But at the point we become self-insured, it would be judicious for us to have a reserve in case of bad experience in a particular year. And finally, I talked about budget assumptions earlier. As those numbers start rolling in, as state aid and state grants start coming in, and we have definite figures, once the state health benefits plan tells us what the actual increase will be, we'll adjust those assumptions, and that will affect our bottom line. There's a lot of information in the appendices. There's more information on our website. I would encourage those who are interested to go there. But we'd like to leave as much time for clarifying questions from the public and for probing questions also from the board. Board President, would you like to?
All right, then at this point, are there any, this isn't part of the public comment necessarily, are there any clarifying questions for the superintendent based on his presentation? Okay. And again, you're always, we have one, yes, you can stand up then.
Mr. Curious, on page 13, the last appendix,
I think you said page 13.
page 13 in the handout. Special education management course. That percentages versus budget. Is there such a thing as best practices? What, if there is, what would be best practices? What would that number be?
So the question was pertaining to slide 26 on page 13, where we talk about managing special education costs, and we gave that as a way of showing spending on special education. A couple of points on that slide. Our district, because of the challenges our students face, we have a relatively high percentage of special needs. We're actually at the state average. Looking at the district on the far left of that graph, small district next door, with a much smaller special education population, you can see that they spend a much larger percentage of their budget on special education. So the intention in providing this slide was to say, while we have a much larger special needs population, we spend a smaller percentage of our budget than some of our neighboring districts. Where we can improve is if we can help students, give support to students early enough that they no longer need the special supports that they get as special education. So there are a couple of initiatives underway in the district to reduce the rate of classification, and that's how districts get from where we are to the far right of the graph, where you'll see one of our not quite neighboring districts just up the coast, which has a single-digit special education classification rate. That to me is best practice, but it means that we need to do a lot of work early on in the children's experiences, starting before they even come to the Stanford schools, early childhood, preschool, and once they get to us, early grade literacy, and some supports that we provide them. If we pay the cost up front, to me it's not just a cost out the door, but it's actually returning an on the investment because we avoid future costs in multiple years thereafter. So I would say that that graph actually gives you a sense of best practice. We don't have a hard and fast number of what % of the budget should go to special education. If it helps at all, for state funding purposes, there's a weighting that the state gives in their formula for education. So if you have a general education student, that student counts as one student, no surprise. If you have an English language learner, because they get some additional support, I believe they count as 1.3, something like that. And a special education student, counts as 2 students. So if we spend $13,000 a pupil, you'd expect for the average or typical special education student, and there's no such thing as that, but we have an average figure, it's about twice that number, $26,000.
Yes, go ahead.
I understand the cost factors, but how do you measure success? What are the outcome measures?
So the question was, how do you measure success for a special needs student? Each student has an individual plan with goals, and success is measured against the goals in those individual educational plans. It's that specialized, and if you met our students, they are extremely diverse. So if you were to see the diversity among them, from medically fragile to multiply handicapped, emotionally disturbed, to you name it, you'd understand why the goals would be individualized as opposed to some arbitrary standard that says everybody's going to get to this bar. It's the progress that we're looking for towards that bar.
Okay, if there are no other clarifying questions, then we'll go on to the time for public to be heard, and I'll turn the microphone over to our secretary, Mr. Altamura, to control again. I'm sure he'll say this yet again. Everybody has just 3 minutes to speak. But go ahead, Mr. Altamura.
I think this works. I'm not sure. You may have to take it. Just get it works. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming tonight. Taking time from weeknights, not easy. But it's important for you to share your concerns and for us to know and listen to your ideas. So, like Mr. George said, we allow 2 minutes for each member of the community to speak. We'll give you warning signs, 1 minute left, 30 seconds, and then I'll give you a big thank you. First one up is will be Lisa Butler. Please come up. Either one. Either one.
Oh, over here?
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Lisa Butler, and I am here tonight on behalf of the Stanford High School Governance Council, but I'm also a parent of a 10th grade student at Stanford High School and a concerned taxpayer. I would like to express my support for the completion of the Stanford High School courtyard. For those who are not familiar with this project, the project was scheduled to begin last June 2018 when the students left school, and to be completed upon when they resumed in September of 2018. This project consisted of 3 phases, and the first phase was supposed to be completed around this Christmas, but it's still in process. On December 11th, the School Governance Council held a tour of Stanford High School and invited several of our city officials to come and tour the school. During this time, we showed them all the wonderful programs that we have to offer, and then we stopped at the courtyard for them to see what it looked like. I'd like to read a letter that I just sent last night on behalf of the Governance Council and the PTO, which is called FOSH. I sent this to Mr. Zachary and the entire Board of Ed, as well as 2 Board of Reps who are in charge of education and our state reps. Dear Mr. Zachary, we are writing to you to express our concerns and support for the continuation and full completion of the construction of the Stanford High courtyard. While we understand other issues may have taken priority, this courtyard and its completion is also important to our students, faculty, and the greater Stanford community. In addition to providing an open green space environment for learning and lunchtime for students and staff, it will resolve critical safety and space issues. West Hill High School and AITE offer an outdoor courtyard, making Stanford High School the only high school without an outdoor space. With the increased enrollment in the City of Stanford schools and the city's planned growth, it is essential we invest in and maintain Stanford schools, especially our flagship high school. Recently, Delta Airlines In-Flight magazine featured a story on Stanford and how fabulous it is to live, work, and play in our city. As quoted by Mayor Martin, we must continue controlled, smart growth while continuing to improve the city so it remains a great place to live, work, play, and raise a family. Stanford needs families to choose to stay and raise their children here because we offer great and unique opportunities in our diverse and dynamic public schools. If our school's infrastructure is less than satisfactory, these families will move out of Stanford. They'll be moved to neighboring towns such as Darien, New Canaan, Westport, and Greenwich to seek better environments. We need to maintain Stanford High School so that all parents feel comfortable and want to send their children, knowing our school is not only a safe place to learn, but also a great place where their children will thrive. As Thomas Madden indicated in Stanford, in the publication, Stanford continues to reign as Fairfield County's crown jewel. The city has seen an increase in total home sales by $1 million more than Q3 2017, and an increase in apartment rentals. We need to plan for and address this growing need and the impact it has on our public schools, specifically Stanford High School. With new and exciting academic offerings such as early college studies and the International Baccalaureate program, we need to update our facilities so students and staff can utilize and maximize all the school has to offer. We need an environment where we attract teachers and administrators who are proud to be part of our school system and community.
Thank you, Ms. Butler.
Thank you. And if you need a copy, I have a copy.
Mr. Mike Papa, please come up.
Good evening. My name is Mike Papa. I live in Stanford since 1971, July 1971. Now you can see me too many times over here, but I did a lot of observations throughout the years, and I also attended some of the meetings with the task force and some of the meetings with the board representative and everything. You know, the question is, my observation is the fact that, you know, the will to win means nothing unless you will to prepare. Now, I understand that you guys work very hard on the budget and all these details, but I don't think it's a good idea to just look at these things. We have to look at the whole thing. I think there is waste going on that we are not aware of. You know, for example, you know, we want to fix the school, and we went to the meeting with the board representative in Stanford, and we signed up for $1 million. We don't know exactly where where the money is supposed to go. Now, I am in the business for 31 years, you know, my own business, and 14 years as a psychological landscaper, for 31 years. And when I deal with the general public, they want to know pretty much, they want to have a proposal, you know, so minimum and maximum, you know, pretty much they want to see what they're going to spend it to. You know, over here, we don't seem to work that way. We seem to, you know, everybody knows everything. There's a lot of talk, but not a lot of things done. So I think that there is at least 20% waste on this kind of things that we are not aware of. So we're talking about, if we have spent $20 million over there to fix the school, I think maybe they pay $5 million of waste, because you just give the opportunity to the contractors to just tell you how much they're going to charge by the hours, and they're going to move in and put as many hours as they please. And we do have a control on this, because we can ask for an estimate about how to knock the walls down
And then, since we know that there may be mold inside, there could be another proposal to see whether or not how long it's gonna take, if there is all mold or just after the mold. So, and present it to the people that we elected. This is run by the people. It's not run by the contractors, because it looks like that's where the waste is. We waste a lot of money into these kind of things, and then we don't have enough money to do excellent work for the people, for the new kind of situation we have. So unless we work, we practice excellence, in this kind of things, we always gonna feel miserable because there won't be enough money to produce excellent students, and eventually we're gonna spend more money. So I think it's important that we look at these kind of things in a different point of view altogether. So it's a little bit, this way it's not a good thing. So we need to change on that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mr. Papa, and anyone else that didn't sign up, because we only had 2 people sign up. Anyone else that didn't sign up that would like to speak? Okay, that will conclude our time for the public to be heard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alzamar. Thank you, everybody who spoke. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Tarzi has moved to adjourn. Do we have a second? Ms. Allen has seconded. All those on the board in favor of adjournment, please indicate. 7 on the floor. We have 7-0-0. We are adjourned at 7:52. Thank you very much.